to be back with my family of faith here at St. Matthew's. And I had a wonderful experience representing this community as well as the other faith communities of the ECC here in the United States overseas when I visited the community of the Good Shepherd, a Benedictine community in Belgium. And then I went on to consecrate and dedicate a chapel for the ECC in Lithuania. And from there, went to Poznan, Poland, to receive a community into the ECC of young people. And then after a wild ride in a taxi, I got to Vienna. And so I bring you greetings from all our brothers and sisters of the European communities who are now a part of the ECC. It was an unimaginable experience, and it was one that exceeded all my expectations. And it was my joy to go there with others. And my companion in this mission was Father Jovinus, who is here with us today behind the altar. Stand up, Father Jovinus. Father Jovinus and I have been good friends for the last 12 years, maybe longer. But after this trip, we were really close friends. And he got me out of a couple of scrapes, so thank you, Father Jovinus. You want to say something to the community?
Yeah, you wonder if I could say something?
I would like that very much.
We even share one bed. That close, not that close, but it was a privilege and joy to accompany and be in support and help. Really, we have a good time. Peter got the stories. I have plenty of stories. I was taping, hopefully at the end of this, not this year, maybe next year, I will make a documentary. We have a lot of good material, lots of experiences, and it was a joy to see those communities, to visit the country, have this wild ride with the taxi driver, and so of course everyone sending you our good wishes. They praying for each of you, and I think they're expecting if you could pray for them also.
Thank you, Father Jovinus. It was truly a missionary journey for Father Jovinus and I as we visited these communities, particularly in Poland and Belgium, where most of them are between the ages of 19 and 25. And yet their commitment and their faith was a great source of inspiration to me. They are devoted to Jesus, they're devoted to the gospel, they're devoted to the prayers and devotions of our Catholic tradition. And yet they have reached out to America, to the ECC, and they see what's going on with us here, and they want to be a part. And I was privileged to receive them in to our ECC family, the Ecumenical Catholic Communion. And I must say that when I was over there, it's not so much that you are joining us, but that we are joining ourselves together as equal partners in this venture, that an endeavor that is of the Holy Spirit. God is doing something in the world today, and it's a cause of great inspiration and joy for me to see this, particularly in the young people of Europe. And I hope that some of their faith will be contagious to us and to our young people over here. I'm always talking to the young people of our community saying, I'm hoping you're considering becoming a priest because someday I want to retire. And so far I haven't gotten many takers. But we keep getting older. And so now I'm not as worried because we have plenty of young people preparing for priesthood over in Europe. And if no American young person will be your next pastor here at St. Matthew's, you will be hearing a European with an accent here being your priest from Europe, because that's where you're going to have to go. But I'm glad God has found a way and has provided for our future. that today's gospel is one that if you are a parent, as I am a parent, you can appreciate. Jesus often takes ordinary stories from ordinary life to express a deeper spiritual truth. We call these the parables. And so he is there in opposition to the religious authorities of his time, to the high priest, and to his companions. And they are locked in a tense struggle with one another. And so Jesus now asks and poses this question to them, and he poses it in the form of a story, a very familiar kind of story. It was a father who had 2 sons, and he went to the first son, and he said, "Son, go out into the fields and work." And the son said, "I will not." So the father went to the younger son, and he said to the younger son, "Will you go out in the fields and work?" And he says, "Yes, I will." But the first son, who refused to go, later thought the better of it and went out and worked in the field anyway. And the younger son didn't go at all. This reminds me of my own experience as a father. I have 2 boys. And I run into this dynamic all the time. I'll ask them to do something, and they'll defiantly stand up. Here's a guy who's like maybe barely 4 feet tall, staring up at me and defying me. "I will not. No." You know, I'm bigger than you are. And then, but oftentimes I'll meet that defiance, and sure enough, they may think the better of it and do what I asked them to do. Isn't that been your experience? And vice versa. It is quite something being a father of 2 boys. I have more children than that. I have 5 altogether, but the 2 boys are at home right now. And I'm forced to be constantly engaged with them at home. And you know something? I have no doubt in my mind that human beings are sinners. Because the 2 most blatant sinners that I know live in my house. And they drive me crazy. And I want to go, "You little sinners." And it was on one of these occasions that I realized, you know, I have it really in me to be a fire and brimstone preacher if I want. I've exercised that ability on my own boys. With threats and trying to scare them into doing my will. Jesus says something here very important to us that we never lose sight of. We are called, my brothers and sisters, to live our lives in accord with the will of God. Not because God is some dictatorial parent who wants to lord it over us, but because if we follow the wisdom and the loving way of God, in that we will find true freedom. Freedom from the oppression of ourselves. Freedom from guilt. Freedom from those voices within us that would compel us to do those things which are only interested in self-promotion and looking out for number 1. We are all a part of the me generation. And in our lifetime, we have been committed to this enterprise of trying to please ourselves and trying to live out a life that we would find fulfilling. After all, we say, it's my life, it's my body, and what I do only matters to me. And nothing could be further from the truth. The fact is that you do not own your life free and clear, that you belong to a community that belongs to God. You are part of something greater than the smallness of yourself. And you are not the most important thing in the universe, and you're not the center of all reality. We need to be reminded of this truth. It is a bitter pill for us to take, but therein lies our freedom when we recognize that and do as the prophet Ezekiel said. Repent, change our ways, stop acting in this selfish kind of way. Because it's not the way we have been designed to live. It is not our destiny to live totally unto ourselves as an individual, only concerned about self-interest, but we are called to live for one another. And if we do that, my brothers and sisters, we will unleash a new harmony into the world. We will bring new peace on a planet that is in desperate need of peace. I hear about on the news, when I was over in Europe, I didn't hear any news about America. You know, over here we're inundated with news. And and opinions and this and that. And so when I got back, I went back and started listening to it again. And everyone's complaining about the economy. There's fear all around that we're going to hit another recession again. Have you heard that? And we're all worried. Well, I don't know. I worry too. I'm like the rest of us. These things do concern me. But my brothers and sisters, this mess that we're in is of our own making. We created this because we have pursued, particularly as Americans in our society, the cult of the self. We have pursued the acquisition of wealth and advantage to such an extreme, and now the greed is coming back to haunt us and our society. We have brought this on ourselves. The economy is not something that God made happen to us. It's not the result of any natural disaster that has befallen us, but rather it is something that we cause by our relentless pursuit of things that don't matter after all. We still have each other. We are still living in community with one another, and those relationships are the most important thing in life. Not the money we have in the bank account, and not the material items we have acquired. And I know that you all agree with what I'm saying because it resonates with you. But sometimes bad things happen to bring us back to reality and to count those things that are so important as maybe being unimportant, and to realize what are the deeply most important values that we have in life. We have one another. And the only way that we can live in community and peace with one another is to live life of selfless giving. To look out for the interests of others. If you're busy, and you're busy in your life and time taking care of others and looking out for the interests of others, then you don't have to worry about yourself because others will give back to you. It is like a natural law, like karma, that is built into the very fabric of the universe. And if we give of ourselves to one another, then this recession would be over overnight. And we wouldn't be griping and feeling sad about this situation. We would rather be rejoicing that God has given us the gift of life and has blessed this planet with an overabundance of resources that we can freely share in. This is the vision of Jesus. This is the vision of the New Testament. And it's something that Paul, the apostle, understood quite well. When I was over in Europe, I realized that I couldn't speak any language except English, which is not real helpful if you're not around people who speak English. And when you talk for a living, that's really a problem. But fortunately, I had interpreters, and I was with people. But after a while, when you're talking to people, or you're with people that you can't speak to each other, you do a lot of smiling and a lot of nodding, you know, and that sort of thing. And I realized in that moment that even though I could not speak their language, and they could not understand or speak my language, except by means of an interpreter. Many did know English, fortunately, the younger people did. There is another language, my brothers and sisters. You see, you and I, we speak English, and you can understand what I'm saying to you right now, for the most part. But the reality is, and I know this from experience, even though I speak the same language as many of you, we constantly misunderstand each other. Isn't that true? I know this because I have my wife point it out to me constantly. We speak the same language, but sometimes I wonder. But there is another language that is beyond words. It is the language of the human heart. It is a language that can't be reduced to so many sounds or written words. It is a language that we all know so very well. And it's a language that we can become skilled and learn how to speak to one another because it's the language of love. And so we can look into each other's eyes and we can embrace one another and we can be together and not say a word because the language of our hearts communicate quite effectively with one another. How many know that this is true? I experienced this. I experienced it with people that I could not understand, and they could not understand me, but our hearts were sharing a common reality, and there was communication at a deeper level. Sadly, the human heart so easily goes astray, doesn't it? You see, when we're born into this world, we're born with open hearts. But then we start to experience injury and pain in life, and our hearts become scarred and tough. Our hearts become stone. And this is something that has happened to all of us. I remember as a child the first time being rejected by a friend, how painful that was, and so I built a barrier over my heart to prevent that kind of pain from ever returning. And after a lifetime of doing this, our hearts become cold and hardened. And God speaks to us through the prophet Ezekiel today. He says, I will give you a new heart. I will take from you the stony hearts of your bodies and place a new heart made of tender flesh. And so, my brothers and sisters, God is at work in your life and within your heart. Even at this moment that you sit here in this moment of prayer in this sacred place, God is secretly at work in a hidden way, and He is doing a heart transplant. He is exchanging your stony heart for the heart of Jesus, for the sacred heart of Jesus, which is the heart of pure and divine love. And then the Apostle Paul speaks to this in his letter to the Philippian church, which was a community much like our own, a small community in a Roman colony in Macedonia called Philippi. And he writes to this community, who incidentally the pastor was a woman by the name of Lydia. I didn't know if you knew that. So he writes this letter to them, and he reminds them by quoting an old hymn that they knew from the celebration of the liturgy. And he tells us to have the same mind of Jesus. We are not only to have the heart of Jesus, we are to have the same mental attitude of Jesus, who, although he existed in the very form of God, although he was divinity, he emptied himself. Regarding divinity is not something worth hanging on to if it meant losing the human race. And so Jesus walked among us, among the Jewish people. And they were in his presence only a short time when they realized they were in the presence of an extraordinary human being, remarkable human being. His enemies were afraid of him, but his friends regarded him as being more than a man, that somehow he was the embodiment of the divine life. And in this great hymn that Paul quotes, he tells us that Jesus became a slave. It wasn't that Jesus became a human being living in a palace somewhere or a wealthy CEO. No, Jesus became someone who would be regarded at the very bottom of the human pecking order. He humbled himself to be of the lowest. And not only that, but he even was obedient, doing his Father's will. He did not refuse his Father. He did what his Father asked him to do. And so he gave his life up to a shameful death. Death on a cross. We hear death on a cross so much that our hearts, which are so prone to this, have become jaded and hardened to it. It doesn't move us. It's just a part of the creed. We sing it in our songs. We depict it in our art, but we fail to see that Jesus could have died in any manner, but he chose to die in the worst possible manner for his day. The most shameful kind of death, the most torturous kind of death. There were 3 other attempts on Jesus' life in his ministry. His hometown, the Nazarenes, decided to throw him off the face of a cliff. But he walked in their midst. They were unable to carry out their evil deed. And twice more, people took up stones to stone Jesus, but he seemed to pass through their midst, and they were unable to launch those stones at him. Jesus says, "No one can take my life from me. I give it willingly. I will choose the time. I will choose the place. For I give my life. If I lay down my life, I also have the authority to take it up again. No one can take my life." So Jesus freely chose to go to Jerusalem on that fateful day and to give his life for humanity in a most visibly excruciating and shameful kind of death, the death of crucifixion. Whenever you read this with an open heart, my brothers and sisters, you're moved to tears. It is a moving story. Why did it have to be that way? Why was it the Father's will for Jesus to die such a death? And I think, my brothers and sisters, the answer should be quite obvious. Because it was the only way that God and love could reach the human heart. Otherwise, we would have been unconvinced. We complain to God out of our bitterness. We have all kinds of gripes that we could say to God about how He's created this world and made me a miserable person. But ultimately, the crucifixion says to your heart that God will hold back nothing to save you and to embrace you and to give you the divine love. And so, as Jesus died, He also was raised. And there's no other name under heaven than that of Jesus of Nazareth, from which every angel and every being in all the universe will bow the knee. That's quite a hymn, isn't it? That's a lofty picture of this man Jesus. And you know, it comes from one of the most ancient, earliest parts of the New Testament. It was written within the first decade of Jesus' resurrection. So the belief of Jesus being the divine Son of God who came to be the Savior of the world was not something that was exaggerated over generations of time until we have tall tales like Paul Bunyan. This was being believed and said by the contemporaries of Jesus in their time and pace. They saw it, and this is the witness they give to us, and it's been entrusted to us, and this is the mystery we must live out. My brothers and sisters, we must live in obedience to God, for He is merciful and compassionate. We must allow God to do His heart surgery upon our souls and to give us that sacred heart of love, the tender heart of compassion, that we may embrace one another and live in a community of peace and live lives committed to the way of love and the way of Christ. That's the mind we must have. You no longer have to carry the burden of pleasing yourself. Rather, you can let go and please God and allow God to bring you joy unspeakable. Shall we stand now as we profess our faith?